Let me repeat that again. Is that your prayer this morning?
Amen. Amen.
The Bible says, create in me a clean heart and renew a right spirit. Is that your prayer today?
Oh, yes.
Do you actually believe that God has that capability, that capacity to take something that is unworkable and unusable and to recreate a clean heart?
Amen.
Is that your prayer this morning?
Amen.
Pray with me. And now, Father, we're here. You heard them. This is their prayer. This is our prayer. So, Lord, as we go through this word, I ask that you would please first forgive me. I'm not capable of going into the depth and the nuances of what you had shown me this week. But I know that the enemy has been trying to disrupt this message. So however the message goes forth, Lord, may it sit in the hearts of mankind. And may somebody today make a decision for Jesus.
Yes, Lord.
We pray this in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen. Recognize the time is at hand.
Take your time.
I intend to. I want to just review some things that we have talked about over the last few weeks. When we did the first district day, if you were to call it, we looked at what did God forget, right? We saw the story of Zechariah where he had the vision of Joshua the high priest. He stood before God, defiled, filthy. And we recognized that he was in a dangerous situation because he was in God's presence, and God does not allow sin to be in his presence. But we saw that instead of God deciding to eliminate this high priest who carried the sins of Israel on his shoulders, that he forgave him on the basis of what he would do. For God knew that later, as he had said in Genesis, that he would come and die for mankind. So he said, I have a guarantee, so I'm going to forgive you based on what I'm going to do. And as we went through some of the other passages, we looked at certain themes, like when we were last here in Decatur, opened their eyes. We looked at 2 Kings chapter 6, and we saw that story of Elisha and how there were an army of horses and chariots were sent to him, but God responded back by having an army of horses and chariots of fire. But strangely enough, God didn't use that army to destroy the other army because he understood the political dynamics. Instead, he encouraged Elisha to move them out of the area of danger, and he gave them bread and water. And we saw that wasn't inconsistent with God's character being a God of mercy, grace, and compassion, because we find Jesus says the same thing. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. If your enemy is hungry, give them something to eat. If they're thirsty, give them water to drink. So we saw that in those passages. And then last week we had a good time in Peoria because we looked at the Tower of Babel.
Well,
Now, traditionally, when we look at the Tower of Babel, there's some things we traditionally like to say, like Babel means confusion. And then we want to swing into prophecy of Revelation about, see, the world is confused. But we found out that in examining the text, that the word does not mean confusion, even though that was the result.
Oh my.
The word meant gate of God. Babel. So when the Hebrews heard the story of how God confused their languages, and the idea and the audacity of these people, where God told them to disperse, to be fruitful and multiply, they decided to stay together and unite under a banner of human autonomy. We're going to create a city and a tower, a life without God. And so they named the place the Gate of God, thinking that they would build this tower to rise above any flood that he would send to destroy them. So God, instead of destroying them, decided I'll be creative and give them all languages. They were confused, construction stopped, and they dispersed as God had said. We realize from that God doesn't always get what he wants. Are you with me so far? And so it's with the context of this. We're still under our theme, remember your Creator. Next quarter, remember your Savior. So we're still operating on this theme of understanding God as a creator, because we realize that if we're going to be effective at reaching people for Christ, we cannot start by arguing about whether or not Christianity is correct. See, most people believe that God exists. That isn't a challenge. Most people, even people who are deep in science, when they study dark matter, when they look at atoms, when they look at the celestial bodies, they can tell intelligent design is there. But when we have to ask the question, though, on the basis of what you believe, do you believe that God's character is a particular way? Or did God just order the universe in such a way in which evolution and violence is the way in which we progress? Or did God create an environment that was peaceful and loving and then gave us the choice of how we were going to follow? So I would argue that when we're looking at this standpoint, we first have to look at what the Creator's attributes are. What principles did the Creator institute? And so last week when we were looking at the Tower of Babel, we had discovered that city was the beginning foundations of idolatry. Y'all real quiet today. And so it's with this understanding that as I was talking to God about how we are to move forward, he hit me with some information that I wasn't expecting. And so today's subject is going to be part 1 of a part 4 series. Now I'll tell you right now, I'm aware of the first 2 parts. God has not shown me the other 2. But he said 4. We're starting Battle of the Gods.
Okay. Amen.
Some of y'all are nervous and quiet because we're using gods. Don't worry about it. We're going to stay in the Bible. So our subject this morning is Battle of the Gods. So I'm going to read to you briefly Exodus chapter 3. Thank you so much for reading that text. And so we're going to back up a little bit to verse 10. Exodus 3, verse 10. And I'm reading from the English Standard Version. If you're reading from another version, that's okay. I'm not criticizing it. We're just going to go through what the word says. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? That is the question he poses to God. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children out of Egypt? And he said, but I will be with you, and this shall be a sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. And now in verse 13. Then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God your fathers has sent me to you, they will ask, what is his name? What shall I say to them? Verse 14. God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say to this people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. Now, God often responds to people's questions in very interesting ways. When we look at Genesis, we realize that we had talked about first Genesis chapter 1 presents this idea of a sovereign God. The word is used as Elohim. This is the God that created the cosmos, the universe, the earth, and everything in it. Then in Genesis chapter 2, we had examined the idea that the Elohim Adonai, or Jehovah, this personal God who stoops on the ground and carves out man out of the dust of the ground, breathes into him the breath of life, gives them a mission, gives them an assignment, gives them a wife. Adam responds in poetry. And we find that the environment's perfect. Then in Genesis chapter 3, we find that the problem there shortly after ensues, where the serpent shows up. We can argue about who the serpent is, but the serpent shows up and poses a question or a statement back to them that they're aware of. And in examining that passage, we look there in Genesis chapter 3, verse 5. He says this, "For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." And as I studied this passage in the context of this temptation that ensued, I realized something in particular. While sin was always presented in a positive aspect, we talked about that, right? Sin has always been presented as good, as pleasurable, as right. The reality is that the serpent did not entice them just on the basis of it being good. He enticed them by saying to them, "I don't need you to worship me, you worship yourself." Oh, if I can just get one person in here today.
Amen.
You see, the devil's not interested in you worshiping him. Okay.
You're right.
Let's go through the text for a second. Let's turn for a second to Isaiah 14:14. What did I say?
Isaiah 14:14.
And as I said in other sermons, things aren't always appearing what they seem they are to be. I'm setting you up for something.
Amen.
Isaiah 14:14. In this prophetic quote, Isaiah makes this statement. Here it is back in 12. "How you have fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven, above the stars of God. I will set my throne on high, and I will sit on the mount of assembly, in the far reachings of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the cloud. I will make myself like the Most High." Look at the passages in Ezekiel. Look at the passages in Revelation. The intent of the devil, which is also revealed in Revelation, was to ascend above God.
Yes.
He wanted to be like God. When he tried to be like God, God said, "You cannot do that." Why can I not do that? Because you're created. God, by definition, and I would argue this with anybody, God, by definition, is uncreated.
That's true.
Everything that exists that we are aware of is created. Whether it's the universe, it comes from somewhere. Whether you support the Big Bang Theory, whether you support evolution, we can all agree that everything is created. It has to come from somewhere. People are trying to debate whether or not it has a starting point. We know that it comes from a starting point. Both science and religion agree with that. Where we argue is, was it God or was it not God? But God, by definition, is uncreated.
Yes.
And so we have this challenge where the devil believes he has no capacity to create. None whatsoever.
Not at all.
So what he spends time doing is manipulating and deceiving.
100%.
And his perfect target is those who God created in his image and likeness.
Yes. All right.
You see, when God created humanity, we have covered these aspects. God created humanity with the ability to rule, to have dominion, to have authority over things that were created, even though they were created. They named those things. God did not name those things. He brought the animals to Adam. Adam named those things.
Yes.
The ability to name something shows ownership and responsibility over that thing.
That's true.
This is why we name our children. We don't present our children before God and wait for God to say this will be the name.
You're right.
That might happen sometimes in the Bible, but we don't do that. We take ownership and responsibility over our children, we name them, and we are responsible for governing their activities and their behavior until they're the age where they recognize that they're an adult. Then, hopefully, when they get married, have children, the same thing happens. And so human beings have this God-like quality, which they're supposed to take care of things that they name. Have responsibility over those things. The devil recognized this. And so what he did is he said, you know what? I'm not going to be able to get these people to worship me directly. I just need them to co-sign on my mission statement. The idea then was, I'm going to convince the first two human beings to worship themselves. If you just take of this fruit, you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Then they saw it was pleasurable, it was a good idea. They took it, ate, and they realized, and their eyes were open. They were naked. And so I would submit to you today that the devil's technique of trying to get us to worship ourselves hasn't changed.
That's true.
That hasn't gone away. And so now we find an interesting situation. We had studied the idea that in the genealogies after the flood, that we had the descendants of Noah spread out. Family conflict happened, Babel happened, spread out. The descendants of Ham created one of the locations that we're studying now today, Egypt. That was the name of one of his sons. Egypt. What is it about Egypt that the Bible keeps bringing it up over and over again?
Come on.
Well, we found out in history that Egypt got to a place of having strong military power. Egypt was the strongest force of a nation on earth. Nobody rivaled Egypt. It would be the equivalent to the United States. North Korea can do whatever they want, but if the United States really wants to get upset, North Korea will shut that down. It's only because America just kind of lets this happen that's happening. So don't worry about all that. When you see America get up and decide they want to shut something down, as small as they are, they'll shut it down. Egypt was the same way. The nations around them, Canaan, the Hittites, all of these people started riling up. Pharaoh will look up, go like this, and rebellion would stop. We also have to understand that from the text, and we're going to understand what is happening here. Pharaoh grew up believing he was God.
Yeah, he did.
He did.
It wasn't bedtime stories of praying to my almighty deity. And for the purposes of today's conversation, I will mention some of those things. I know people get nervous, but it's all right. Jesus is here. Maybe he grew up hearing the stories of Ra and all these elite Egyptian gods. He grew up hearing those stories growing up as he was a child. But the reality is that his parents, his society, everything pushed in him the idea that even though these gods are here to serve and for you to respond to, there is no greater God than you. Imagine a child being told from infancy that he is God. Whatever he wants, he gets. Whatever time he wants it, he gets it. No matter what it was, whether it was women, toys, expansion of land, it was his. Now, not only to back up that idea, did his family tell him this, and did society bow to him, but we find later in the text when Moses is asking this question to Yahweh, he's not asking the question because he's like, well, who am I? Should I say something? He's not saying it because of that. He's saying it because he grew up in a palace and he sees some things. He knows he's about to approach God. He respects the fact Moses heard the stories of Yahweh. He understands it. He grows up half Egyptian, half Hebrew. He grows up in a twin culture. But his question is relevant. Who am I that can go up to Pharaoh? And so God, in his genius, in his understanding, says to him, this will be a sign to you. Not only are you going to get those people out of Egypt, you will worship him, you will worship me here. And so God provides him miracle after miracle to perform in front of Pharaoh. Why? Because Pharaoh would not believe just the words that would be coming out of his mouth. Imagine that you were to throw down that bass guitar onto the ground and it turned into a snake. I don't know about you, but Pastor Greaves will run out of the church. I'm not about to pick up anything else to combat that, unless God gave me the authority to do so. But we have to understand that when Moses dropped the staff, Pharaoh was not fazed. He's like, oh, I've seen that before when I was 5. Hey, come here. And his boys came and dropped the same thing. So we find that God, in some situations, have to respond to people in a particular way within their context. And if it's not for God taking that context in mind when he's going after somebody, they would lose a sense of who he was. Oftentimes in our churches, when we're going out to evangelize people and to talk to other people, our biggest challenge is understanding where they're coming from and meeting them where they are.
That is true.
Pharaoh's not going to understand anything else. And so God decisively had to respond to all the gods that were happening in Egypt in order to get his attention. Can I share with you some facts that I learned?
Go ahead, sir.
Let me pull out this note for a second. Unfortunately, Pastor Greaves should never print double side again. Okay, here we go. We're gonna build this up, and then you're gonna understand why this was important. Because the plagues that God dropped on Egypt responded to each god. Every single plague that God dropped, he did it in escalation from minute to great. Okay? So first, Nile turned to blood, right? He turned the Nile into blood. This particular god, I can't pronounce it. I apologize. I think it's Canaan, the guardian of the Nile, and it was also responding to Hapti, the spirit of the Nile, and Osiris, the giver of life, whose bloodstream was the Nile. The frogs, I think it's Het, the god of resurrection, who also assisted women in childbirth and whose form was a frog. Gnats, or also translated as mosquitoes. God responded in that way. Granted, I couldn't find the God for that, but I saw it, I just didn't have time to put it together. So y'all forgive me. Y'all research it yourself, and you forgive me for that. Flies, can't pronounce that either. God of creation and the movement of the sun. The plagues on the cattle was Hathor, the mother goddess of whose form was a cow. Or it was Apis, the bull god, who was a living personification of the creator god, or a symbol of fertility. We'll come back to that soon. Boils responded to the god of medicine. Hail responded to the goddess of the sky, the goddess of life, and the protector of the crops. Locusts responded to Isis, the god of life, or Seth, the protector of the crops. Darkness responded to all the gods who produce sunlight. And finally, when God got to this point, it was already too late. Death of the firstborn. This was a response to not just Osiris, the giver of life, but also to Pharaoh, who was considered to be a god. And so we find that God is intentional about how he responds to idolatry. Now, this is what was the biggest challenge to me. I want you to swing over to Exodus 32. What did I say?
Exodus 32.
I'm still setting y'all up. Exodus 32. Exodus 32. Now, somebody should shout amen on this one. Because God made a promise in chapter 3 that you would worship me on this mountain, and God got them to that mountain. Oh, y'all are quiet.
Amen.
I'm trying to make this as practical as possible. Because there's times where God promises He's going to do something for us.
My God.
And we get so impatient about whether or not God is going to come through again.
Oh.
You may ask, God, please get me out of this financial situation. Help me out with this relationship. Please help me in my academics. And we pray to God, and then we get upset because God seems to take too long. But then we find out that God brings us right back to the place where He says He's going to bring us. And so we find that God had to bring all these plagues and then bring them out and then give them financial resources and food and cattle. Gets them through the Red Sea by splitting it in half. Gets them to the other side. Gets rid of the Egyptian army. Gets them through the desert after they complained, said they needed food, brought manna, brought quail, because they want chicken. God does all these things. And now they arrive at the mountain. God gives them the 10 Commandments. Now, I don't know how y'all grew up, but some of us grew up quoting the 10 Commandments saying, thou shalt have no other God before me. And then we go down the list.
Yes.
No. That's not the beginning of the first commandment. Why are y'all so quiet? Hold on. Hold your finger in Exodus 32. We're coming back to this. I'm trying to get y'all to see the trajectory that's happening. Turn to Exodus 20 for a second. Here's what God says. And God spoke all these words, saying, parentheses, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt,
Yes.
out of the house of slavery.
Oh.
Then He says, you shall have no other gods before or besides me. Let me make this point.
Teach us.
He's teaching.
God, when He saved people out of Egypt, He did not give them a list of rules without context. God made the statement, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. I saved you, now serve me. God takes the people out and then instructs them about, now what do you do that I've saved you? I don't know why we spend time sometimes pushing forward the 10 Commandments without context. The commandments cannot be operated outside of a context of a loving relationship with God.
Amen.
People need to understand that they were saved, and now that they're saved, here's how you respond to your saving them.
Yes.
Sometimes we knock on doors and we're like, do you know the 10 Commandments? We want to hit people with the Sabbath. The Sabbath is inappropriate without a context of knowing that somebody saved you out of slavery.
Yes.
He took you out. You didn't have any way of setting yourself free. God had to intervene and save you.
Amen.
You were oppressed. Now you're free. Now that you're free, here is the guidelines of our relationship. Imagine if you were to start, and I imagine that this is why in our relationships with people we get so confused. We go up to try to date somebody and we give them a list of things that we're looking for. You must do this, you gotta cook this way, you gotta dress this way, you gotta like this. We go down this list without any context. I do not get up on Sabbath morning demanding from my wife that if you do not cook, we're no longer in a relationship. Because I'm in a relationship with my wife, she cooks. And because I'm in a relationship with my wife, I cook. I might not cook as well, but I cook. It's what God laid out to them in plain language that they could understand. Because God wanted to speak to them personally, but when God began to speak to them personally, they got afraid.
That's not
First thing He said, no other gods besides me. None. You can say whatever you want, just do not appropriate how you became successful and how you got out of your situation. Don't give that to anybody else. That's my glory.
Yes.
Now, back to Exodus 32. Because now it baffles me that these people witnessed all sorts of miracles that God performed for them. All sorts of miracles. And here we have the story of the golden calf.
Oh, yeah.
Battle of the gods. You see, you have to understand why God says all these things, even with the sanctuary and the temple meeting. There's a reason why God didn't ask the people to carve out an image of himself. God in chapter 3 says, I am. What does that mean? I am.
I am. Right?
I am, always was, will ever be.
Amen.
There's no definition for that. Time after time, human beings take materials that God makes and they shape it out of their imagination to create some sort of thing, and they put limits on that God to a particular area of influence that God has. The God of the sky, the God of the waters, the God of my finances, the God of my relationships, right? This is what human beings do. They take these things and they create images. And what was interesting about the Old Testament is that anytime Israel were to go to battle, or anytime a civilization were to go to battle, they were to bring their God.
That's right. Yeah.
So for example, if I brought my God and he brought his God, we would stand up on the battlefield. And if I were to defeat him or he were to defeat me, it says a lot about my God. And by me conquering you or you conquering me, now I have to serve your God.
Come on, right? Preach.
God never allowed the children of Israel for them to create an image of him. Why did God do that? Because God is trying to get them in a faith relationship with him. See, if I can construct a God that has these limitations, that have specific requirements on how I ought to praise him in order to get a prayer through, or how I ought to pay him in order for something to work out. If I were to set up a God in that way, that limits that God based on my ideas.
Come on. All right now.
That's true.
It becomes a transactional relationship. I do this, you do that. I do this, you do that. I pray to you this way, you better respond to me this way. God, I asked for this, therefore you must be doing this. Idolatry at its center is developing a system of transactions between one and a deity.
Have mercy.
And so these people got frustrated because Moses is taking too long.
Right.
God is taking too long.
Right.
And so let's create a calf. Now, what did we say earlier that this calf was? It was the living personification of the Creator God. In fact, we find out that this calf became significant for Egypt worship. So the people, and follow me on this one. See, this God wasn't just a personification of the Creator. Help me, Holy Ghost. Help me make this plain, Jesus, because someone is not understanding. Help me understand. God, help me.
Bless him.
It wasn't just a personal personification of the Creator. This God also served as the intermediary between God and man.
True.
My God.
The intermediary between God and man. Something that was put in place to talk to God. Moses was asked by God to be that representative because the people were scared.
Yes.
He said, I'll dwell among them, I'll hang out with them, I'll talk with them. Y'all are frustrating me, but I'll talk with y'all. But I'm gonna send Moses, he'll talk to me, I'll talk to you, he's gonna represent me. We're gonna get this right. And here comes the children, impatiently deciding that these are the gods that brought us out of Egypt.
Wow.
Do you know how much that broke God's heart?
Yeah.
I mean, we sometimes want to be logical about this. God said this, so therefore this. What about God's heart? That's why later in the passages, he always said, they grieved me to my heart. I do things for them. I protect them. I take care of them. Every time they pray, I listen. I'm ready to respond. And here you come setting something else up. Can I make it plainer?
Make it plain.
Idolatry, as I said last week, some of y'all weren't here, but I'll say it again. Idolatry is when we take the resource and apply it as the source.
The resource.
Y'all get it?
Come on.
Let me
Go ahead.
Come on.
The resource as the source.
Bless him.
listen, let's pray. Let's pray for a second. Just pray and think for 1 second. We can entertain all day, but I'm trying to make a point here.
Go ahead.
Understand that anytime you take a resource and apply it as the source, you're falling into idolatry.
Amen.
And the challenge with this generation is that we don't see it.
Right.
That's true.
We don't see it. Bills are late. Oh, I got money in the bank. We don't talk to God anymore.
My.
Praying about a relationship. Don't have to talk to God anymore. Tinder and Twitter becomes our medium. Doing well in school, not praying, not reading scripture, not talking to God. I'm just going to study this textbook. I'll hang out with this professor. I know if I make political moves, I'll make it. Success on the job, I have the degrees. I have everything that I need. And though then we misapply it, we forget God in the process.
Right.
When we're stuck in our situation, we want to call God's name again, but we lean ourselves to other idols.
Yes.
Come on.
And we're so vain that we spend so much time looking at ourselves to be the solution.
Yes, Lord.
That's true.
I can fix this, I can do this, I don't need God. Why do I need to talk to God about that? I have the skills, I have the technology, I know how to do it. This is the generation that we're in. So these people lost a sense of responsibility and ownership to God after God reminded them, you're not following these rules because I just said it, it's because I saved your soul. This is why God got frustrated. He lost his cool. And I would say in all justification, anytime God gets upset, it's justified. God, when we get upset, usually it's unjustifiable. We become irrational. We make quick judgments. When his judgment is always appropriate. So sometimes we miss this idea of God because we get so focused on his anger, or we get overly focused on his love that we don't see why he gets upset over things. God gets upset over things because he's saying that these people don't even realize what they're doing. They're running around to everything else except me. I'm the only solution. And it's not because I'm being egotistical. It's because I'm trying to save them. This bull, this golden calf, shows up later in Kings. Jeroboam tries to set up his empire. Gets upset and decides, I'm going to set up 2 bulls. Starts worshiping. God gave them the land, the territory. He understood the history. And they went and did whatever they wanted. Dropping children on Molech's hands that used to be heated up on fire.
Yeah.
Can I tell you all a quick story? Now, I'm not saying this about a particular country. I'm just telling you the context because it happens in the United States. I was in Uganda in 2010. We're doing evangelistic meetings. So, we're preaching. Doing the best I can, just reading the Bible, preaching. And one day, there was a lady that came up to us, and she was like, all right, Pastor, and then, Pastor, I need your help. So I'm looking like, okay, well, I gotta go home, I'm tired, but let's talk. So we're talking. My son is in prison. And I don't know what to do. He was in prison for a crime he did not commit. What? Can you do something? Can you talk to your God about this?
Talk to God.
Lord.
Now, I'm going to be very honest with the church there. I'm not going to lie from the pulpit. I did not get him to say, well, come on, in the name of Jesus, deliverance. in my mind, I was business pre-law at that time. Business pre-law, not law, business pre-law. And I said to myself, well, do they have an attorney? Did they file a brief? Is there a motion? How do we know that this person really didn't commit the crime? I'm going down. I say, man, this ain't gonna work. You got money for bail. I'm going through a list of items. A list of items because I'm saying to myself, God, you are restricted by this situation.
Oh my. Oh my.
And so I'm thinking this through. And a well-intentioned person walked in hearing the conversation, pulled me to the side and said, we need to pray for this person. I'm saying to myself, brother, how are we going to pray for this person? Because I'm not going to go represent, like, how are we going to do this? He's like, God can do all things.
Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Yes, he can.
Now, I made the mistake of, you know when you do a cautious prayer, you start adding all these hyperboles in there. Come on, just be honest.
Yeah.
God, you know, if we know if it's your will, right? We say all these conditions because we don't want to be embarrassed. And that way, if somebody, the person comes to me like, well, you pray this. Well, I said, according to God's will. According to God's will. But we began to pray for that woman. Are you listening, church? We began to pray for that woman. And somewhere in the midst of praying for her, I have seen God do miraculous things during that campaign. I don't know why I defaulted and said, God can't do this. We're praying. And the text of Luke and Isaiah come down where it says he came to set the captives free. And so I said, God, I don't know why this happened, but you're the only one who can take care of it.
Yes, you are.
Okay? Look what happened the next day. This woman began to run around town screaming at the top of her lungs. The God of that preacher got my son out of jail.
Wow. Thank you, Jesus. Hallelujah. Amen. You gotta hear it. One more time. All right. Hallelujah.
The God of that preacher got my son out of jail. In Africa. Come on, y'all. Let's be honest. Not really judicial process all the time. Just got out. No explanation. No out.
That's God.
And here I am baffled that God did it. But you see, here's the influence of idolatry that happens in our lives. That it socially conditions us to disbelieve what God can do. And even after God delivers us from something, we go right back. We just go right back.
Oh, yeah.
You pray about pornography, God got it out of your mind, and you go right back.
Oh, my.
Why y'all so quiet?
But we hear you.
Come on.
That's true.
Your bills didn't get paid on time and you're worried about your mortgage? God got you out of it?
Yes, he did.
Next month is the same time of the month.
Huh.
30 days, maybe 31, same time of the month. Oh God, I don't know how it's going to be done. Let me talk to this banker. Let me check my credit. Let me go call it. That's all good and dandy. God can provide those, but don't miss God in the equation. Don't miss God in the equation. You see, God's biggest challenge, church, was not defeating the other gods.
That was no challenge.
What was it?
His biggest challenge was not getting those stubborn people out of Egypt. His biggest challenge was getting Egypt out of them.
That's right. That's true. That's true, Pastor.
Revelation 14, 15, and 16. When you read through the book of Revelation, you find that the same plagues are poured out on the earth.
Yes.
Y'all read it when you get home. the same plagues are poured out on the earth are the same plagues that were poured out on Egypt.
Amen.
Revelation, right? We mentioned this a few weeks ago. Revelation is not the revelation of Jesus Christ. It's the revelation from Jesus Christ.
Amen.
What happens in Revelation is that during the end of time, the people go back to a state of idolatry.
Come on. Yes, Lord.
It is not just on an individual basis. It is not just with a political system. It happens with God's church.
All is on it.
God is not a polygamist.
No.
Not at all.
Nope.
And so when you see that woman in Revelation, right? The woman. Same woman from Genesis chapter 1.
Yeah.
The woman,
Yeah.
right? Representing God's people, births the child, right?
Yeah.
Who's Christ? It says, then the dragon goes to make war with the remnant of her seed.
Yes.
But then later, we see in the passage that there is a harlot
Yes.
that sits on the beast.
Yes.
God is not a polygamist. It's the same woman.
My God.
God's church that was pure now sits with kings, sits on the beast, and it becomes idolatrous.
Come on.
Why? Because they forgot their creator. Which is why in Revelation there is a call to remember the creator.
That's true.
We're closing.
Hallelujah.
That's true.
So church family, here's the challenge. What is your God? It's not at all bias. Just think about it. What is your God? What would it look like if we just trusted in the Lord? I don't mean that sometimes you don't plan and do strategy and precaution or whatever, but the Bible also says submit your plans to the Lord and your plans to be established.
Yes.
Right? We're not operating on blind faith. See,
No.
every God that these people set up, you have to feel or hear or smell with your senses. God never allowed himself to be carved because he said, look, faith goes beyond the senses. It is not the lack of evidence. I can't stand that text when people say it out of context. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, and the evidence things not seen. And then people operate on blind faith and get into trouble. That's not what the text says. Paul makes the argument that on the basis of what God do, he will continue to do. So have faith.
Say it again.
Faith, well,
That's,
Come on.
that's it.
faith is not lack of evidence.
Yes.
God does not call people into a relationship with him
Yes.
having done nothing to show for it.
Yes.
He doesn't do that. Name one person in the Bible he did that for. Name one. He never did it. He always demonstrated himself to that person in times where they didn't see it. When people couldn't have children, God shows up. I'll make you a great nation. Then they circumvent the situation by having a child elsewhere. God forgives them and still says, I will still make you a great nation.
That's God.
One person, Jacob, right, wants to establish himself and get family property and inheritance. He deceives his brother. Jacob means deceiver.
Oh my God.
God changes his name after in a relationship with him, and then he has to start being honest about what he did and who he was.
Amen. Amen.
In fact, he makes the promise, if you can bring me back to my father's house, I will serve you.
Yes. Jesus.
So God never spends time wasting his time for people to exist and for him not to demonstrate that he cares.
Right.
Then Paul makes the argument in Romans 1. This is why every individual, whether or not they were in church, whether or not they were Adventists, whether or not they were a Christian, has the law written in their hearts and they have some concept of good and evil, and God would have been able to fairly judge those people. I didn't say everyone has an equal chance. Fair chance. Whatever standards of operation God has to use, he's the best person to do it.
Yes.
It's not for us to judge. We have the book. These people did not have the privilege of reading ahead to see what was going to happen or what was currently happening. They were just in the experience, in the wilderness. They got concerned, and then they ended up raising up a God that did not deliver them, only for God then to get upset, shut it down, and still get them to a promised land. In fact, but it's funny because most of them didn't get in. What should have taken 1 to 2 weeks took 40 years. And 2 people got out. That doesn't have to be our story. You see, in the battle of the gods, right? God is trying, the devil is trying to influence. It's a battle of influence. It's not a battle of power. The devil is not God's equal.
Not at all.
Y'all are real quiet, okay?
Not at all.
The devil is not God's equal. You don't have to be worried about him. Well, listen, let's be real. You don't have to worry about him. Is the devil powerful? Yes. Can he deceive? Yes. Your brain is not as powerful as it was with Adam and Eve. They had all the resources. They had high intelligence. We only use 5 to 10% of our brain. We don't live long enough to really expand on thinking. You got to worry so much about the devil. What you got to worry about is getting a relationship with God, so when the devil comes after you, God always promises that He will provide a way of escape. So saints, I am admonishing you. I'm begging you. Choose this day who you will serve. What God do you have in your life? See, people don't get to the point of before bowing before something. They're like, they wake up in the morning and just, I'm going to bow to this thing. Like they get bored and do it. They don't do that. It starts here in the heart. It starts when I'm like, this resource I have is pretty beneficial. And then they just slowly start putting God in the back burner. Until the point you're like, you know what, it's a good idea maybe if we all gather and worship this thing. It's a good idea maybe if we sacrifice this thing. How can I then multiply what's going on? I'm then in control. When God just wants us to trust Him. I'm done preaching. Craig, can you sing a word? Can you sing for us?
Amen.
As he sings, I ask you to pray, because I really believe, this is just Pastor Greaves, I really believe that God is trying to get our attention about the times that we're in. People don't just wake up and start worshiping the dead randomly. It gets to a point. So as he sings, Craig's gonna sing a song, and then I'm gonna ask you a question.